Hello and welcome to Undead Gaming News, your one-stop shop for all things gaming. I'm your host Zombie, and first up this week, sources are claiming that the next generation of Nintendo Switch is already in the hands of key third-party developers, and tidbits about the hardware are already starting to leak. The Nintendo Switch 2 release date has also been spilled, and is allegedly set for the second half of 2024. However, the report is also the bearer of some bad news, with insiders saying that the console may launch with an LCD screen, like the original Nintendo Switch model, instead of the more premium OLED panel of the aptly named Nintendo Switch OLED. Apparently this will be in effort to cut down on costs due to the increased storage of the Nintendo Switch 2, which will help it run the newer, more graphically intense titles, of course. The console will of course retain the portability of the current Switch model, as well as game cartridges. While the sources claim that the cartridge slot won't be going anywhere, there's no definitive information on the possibility of backwards compatibility. Back in February of 2022, Nintendo seemed keen on the idea of transitioning their existing 98 million strong user base to its next generation of console, while third-party publishers have apparently expressed concern that supporting their games on the original Nintendo Switch as well as the Nintendo Switch 2 could negatively impact their sales of the Nintendo Switch 2 titles. The prospect of a Nintendo Switch 2 release with no backwards compatibility seems unlikely given Nintendo's president's comments that the company is doing everything it can to smoothly transition Switch players to its successor, and isn't reducing production of the console anytime soon. Not to mention, the CMA effectively confirmed that the Nintendo Switch's online classic game app will carry over to the Nintendo Switch 2. As for the LCD screen making a comeback, if Nintendo is trying to hit an appealing price point, it does make sense, and it also opens the door for a more premium Nintendo Switch 2 release later down the line, supporting an OLED panel, increased battery life, and possibly other refinements. In other news though, a new leak suggests that Oblivion fans might have a remake in development. The leak comes from a now deleted Reddit post, which was posted on July the 31st by a supposed previous employee of Virtuos Games. According to the leak, Bethesda is planning to release a remake of Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion between the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025. Oblivion was first released in 2006, and it went on to sell 9.5 million copies and receive high critical acclaim. The game is said to be being created using Unreal Engine 5 with enhanced graphics and changes to the gameplay. Although the deleted Reddit post should be taken with a pinch of salt, of course, a mod for the subreddit Gaming Leaks and Rumours has suggested that they received confirmation of the leaker being an ex-employee of Bethesda. The leaker claims that Virtuos Games is leading the project, with Black Shamrock helping the studio for the art. It's unclear if this project started development before or after Microsoft acquired ZeniMax Media, since Bethesda would still have to greenlight the project since it owns the IP. But of course there is also a fan-made remake of Oblivion that's also in the works, so even if this one doesn't come to fruition, there's still that one to look forward to. But also in the news, during the Final Fantasy XIV FanFest keynote, Microsoft Gaming CEO Phil Spencer appeared to announce the news that Final Fantasy XIV is heading to Xbox. He announced the news alongside game director Naoki Yoshida. Phil said, "We want to bring the Xbox community and your Warriors of Light together in a way that's safe, secure, engaging, and above all, fun." Since the game's launch in 2013, the MMORPG has only been available on PC and PlayStation, and according to Yoshida, one of the biggest requests from fans was to bring the game to the Xbox platform. As a result, Final Fantasy XIV will come to the Series S and X, and will feature faster loading times and 4K resolution for the Series X. Fortunately, the Xbox fans won't have to wait for the game's latest expansion to play, as according to Yoshida, the Xbox version will launch in spring of 2024 with an open beta to take place sometime around the launch of patch 6.5. Progress from the open beta will carry over, so Yoshida encourages Xbox players to sign up for the beta. Also on the stage was Square Enix CEO Takashi Kiryu, who made the following statement: "As CEO of Square Enix, we want to continue to deliver fabulous games to fans across the world, and of course we want to welcome the Xbox community as well. And starting with today's announcement of Final Fantasy XIV coming in spring 2024, and whenever possible, we are planning to bring our games to Xbox for players around the world to enjoy. We're really looking forward to working closely with Phil and the Xbox team to make this possible." In response, Phil said, "Thank you, Kiryu-san. We deeply respect the rich legacy of Square Enix, and we look forward to building on the relationship that we've established in bringing Final Fantasy XIV to the Xbox, and partnering closely with you and the Square Enix team on future games." So any games that Square Enix hasn't been paid to have an exclusive deal with PlayStation could be making its way to Xbox in the future. But also in the news, when Path of Exile 2 was announced 4 years ago, it was going to expand on and overtake Path of Exile 1. The original Action RPG's campaign was still going to be playable, but Path of Exile's transformation into Path of Exile 2 would also add in a new campaign and alter the endgame, sort of like how Overwatch 2 replaced Overwatch. However, now the plan has changed. During this year's ExileCon keynote, developer Grinding Gear Games revealed that it's changed its mind, and Path of Exile 2 will now be a separate game that runs its own client. The sequel so far adds 6 new classes, 36 Ascendancy classes, 600 new monsters, 100 bosses, 240 active skills, 1,500 passive skills, new mechanics, and more. Grinding Gear Games co-founder Jonathan Rogers said, "There was a point to where we realised our plan to replace Path of Exile 1 with Path of Exile 2 would essentially be getting rid of a game that people love, for no real reason. So we made a decision. Path of Exile 1 and 2 will be separate, with their own mechanics, balance, endgames, and leagues. The two games won't be totally isolated from each other though." As he added, in-game purchases will be available in both games except where incompatible, and promised that this will be the case for as long as the games exist, stating, "Everything you have ever purchased or will purchase in the future will be usable in both games, unless it's hyper-specific to the content of one of them. You can't transform into a bear in Path of Exile 1, so a reskin of your bear form isn't going to work, but you absolutely can equip that awesome sword skin you got and use all your stash tabs." In other sequel news though, co-op survival shooter Remnant 2 is off to a strong start, as it's broken a franchise record by more than doubling the number of concurrent players at launch when compared to the first installment, and has already surpassed 1 million units sold. This comes by the way of a press release from Gearbox Publishing, which notes that Remnant 2 has exceeded expectations as a commercial and critical hit. Remnant 2 launched on the 25th of July and serves as a sequel to 2019's Remnant from the Ashes. Upon release, Remnant 2 received positive reviews, with critics praising the number of improvements from its predecessor, as well as its replayability, gameplay loop, and variety. The original Remnant from the Ashes launched to favourable reviews as well, but its sequel, Remnant 2, is regarded as a better experience with a slew of improvements across the board. As for our final story, less than 2 months after releasing the Callisto Protocol's first and last story expansion DLC, developer Striking Distance Studios has laid off 32 employees. The layoffs first came to light after numerous employees reported being let go by the studio. Striking Distance parent company Krafton later confirmed that a total of 32 employees have been terminated, and that's of course not an insignificant percentage of the studio's total headcount, which according to Striking Distance's About Us page currently sits at 141 employees in total. Krafton said, "Striking Distance Studios and Krafton have implemented strategic changes that realign the studio's priorities to better position its current and future projects for success. Unfortunately, these changes have impacted 32 employees. Honouring the invaluable contributions of each departing team member, with material support in the form of outplacement services and meaningful severance packages, is our top priority during this difficult moment." The layoffs come less than a year after the release of Striking Distance's first game, The Callisto Protocol, which is a Dead Space-like survival horror game that made a reasonably good impression when it arrived in December of 2022. Unfortunately, launch day performance problems fueled an ugly blowback on Steam, and while the problem was addressed fairly quickly, the evidence remains. The Callisto Protocol still bears a mixed rating across almost 24,000 user reviews. The Callisto Protocol sales were an even bigger problem, however. In January, publisher Krafton revised its expectations dramatically downward from 5 million copies sold to just 2 million, and acknowledged that even achieving the lower figure will not be easy. 2 million units sold still might not sound so bad, but Krafton said at the time it sunk more than $161 million into the Callisto Protocol over the previous 3 years, and it takes more than a couple million copies out the door to recoup that kind of investment. The final nail in the coffin may have been the release of the Callisto Protocol Final Transmission DLC in June, as it too holds just a mixed user rating on Steam, and the actual number of reviews is much lower than the base game. Currently just over 500 people have given it a rating. But that's all we have time for this week. If you have any thoughts on anything discussed this week, please leave it in the comment section below as always, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.